Hello and welcome to my channel. My name's Jo, this is Joey Sewy, and today I've got the third in my series about sewing tools and gadgets, and this one is basically my all-time favourites. So in my last video, just as an update, I announced that some of my content is going to be sponsored by Tailor Nova from now on. This video is not sponsored by anybody. If I do a sponsored video, their name would be up here and I would make it really clear. So just because this is the first video I've done after that announcement, it'll basically be every other video is sponsored. I also announced that we have a competition and we have a discount code, so I will run through all of those things at the end of the video, because if you're watching after the 16th of August, then the competition is ended. But my all-time favourite sewing gadgets will stay my all-time favourite sewing gadgets, so let's get on and talk about those. Now, I'm not going to do them in any particular order because I don't think I could do a top 10. And I should probably make clear that these aren't the gadgets that I think you should definitely invest in if you're starting out sewing. I've done a couple of videos already in this series, one about free sewing tools, which you should definitely get, and one about my top 5, although actually it was 6, top gadgets that I think you should invest in if you are starting out to sew. So that's where you need to go if you're starting sewing. But I thought I would share in terms of my personal process, what would I really not like to sew without. So the very first is sewing machine needles. Now clearly couldn't actually sew without sewing machine needles unless I was doing it all by hand. But since I got into the habit of changing sewing machine needles for each project, so I don't always throw them away. It depends how intense the project has been and whether the machine has started, or the needle has seemed to have started to dull. But I do always pick a needle specific for whatever project I'm sewing with. I talked about this definitely being something that you should invest in, no matter your level or experience of sewing, whether it's just one packet of universal needles so that you can, which one's the universal one? That one, but multi-size, so that you can change per project and you can change when the needle gets dull, or whether it's depending on what you're going to sew. So I've got a jeans needle here. I have got stretch needles. As I said, we've got universal needles. So regardless, you know, each time you start a new significant project and you think you're using fabric that's quite different, do a little bit of research and choose the right needle. But I really wouldn't want to go back to not choosing specific needles for the job. I'm definitely sold on what the needle companies tell you and what wise sewers tell you, which is it does make a difference what needle you use, and I'm in that camp nowadays. My second item, I guess, is a little bit like the sewing machine needles. You can plough on without using it, and I did for years, and I would get skip stitches and I would swear at my machine and I would get upset late at night when things weren't going right. And on reflection, I realise now that a lot of that was because I was using blunt needles. So I've changed that, and it does make a difference, makes everything better. Equally, my trusty piece of cardboard that I called a lump jumper. This was in my free sewing video. I get this out so often when I'm just, you know, it's a tricky bit of sewing, or you're sewing right to the edge of something and you need a little bit of a lump behind what you're sewing or slightly in front, just to keep that foot flat and not having to wiggle up or down. Trusty little bit of cardboard, always have it next to the sewing machine in a little box, and I'm constantly reaching for it. So it's the simplest thing I'm going to show you today, but I would really hate to, for some reason, find the world has no cardboard in it anymore and I couldn't use my trusty piece of cardboard. It really does make a difference for me. My third tool that I reach for all the time, I can pretty much guarantee every sewing project I am going to use this. Again, it's not expensive. It is a marker and measurer. So it's called a sewing gauge. Yeah, I think it's a hemline sewing gauge. I will, although the video isn't sponsored, everywhere that these things are purchasable, I will put links down below, and some of them will be affiliate links, but you know, buy them from wherever you like. Your local sewing shop should be the first place that you think of buying things, because we all need to support our local sewing shops. So I will put a link to specifically what this is, but you will probably have seen it somewhere So that's what it looks like. It has a point at this end. It has a sliding gauge. It has this, which someone did tell me is about measuring the depth from the edge of a buttonhole, I think. I don't use that end so much, but I do use this end constantly to measure hem allowance, seam allowances, hem allowances, whether my needle is in the right place on the machine for a seam allowance. So I'll measure, for example, if my pattern's got a 1 centimetre seam allowance, I'll measure a centimetre on here, I'll measure where the needle is and then where the edge of the fabric is, or maybe where the edge of the foot is, and then I know I can line up my fabric with the edge of the foot, for example. And it really helps me to be accurate. Yeah, I'm definitely a measure 15 times cut once person, because I'm measuring correctly is not one of my strong points. So having something that helps me, and I love the sliding gauge because it helps me not to forget between going to the fabric and going to the machine exactly what I measured. I am capable of that. I am forgetful enough that I can forget whether I measured a centimetre or half a centimetre or 1.2 within the 2 seconds it might take me to move between two places in my room. So that's my third must-have, really wouldn't want to sew without gadget. Now my fourth and fifth are a pair. I kind of need them both, but I want to treat them as two separate ones because I like them for two different reasons. So my fourth is a rotary cutter. So this is the rotary cutter, or the smaller size rotary cutter that I use. It's an Alpha brand one. I have honestly only ever used Alpha. So I know that a lot of people use Fiskars and like that, if I'm even saying the brand right. So I've got no reason to say it's got to be an Alpha one. But rotary cutting, when rotary cutting fabric came into my life, it changed my sewing completely. It's not for everyone because you have to cut out on a large surface, and the rotary cutters aren't cheap, but probably the more expensive part of it is the huge cutting mats that you need. Now I didn't include that, although I couldn't rotary cut without the cutting mats. So it's an expensive investment, and also you then need the space to keep the mats and to store the mats. So this is definitely not for everyone, but if you've got the space and the money to invest in rotary cutting, I think it is, for me anyway, it's the best way to cut out fabric for garment sewing because it is accurate and because it is sharp. Although this one's getting dull, I need to sharpen it. But mainly it's the accuracy and the speed. So all of the methods that I've ever tried, and I haven't tried every method, are slower than rotary cutting and are less accurate potentially than rotary cutting. There probably are other methods that are slightly more accurate, like really tracing out around a cardboard pattern and then cutting by hand with really good scissors on the inside of that line. But for someone with my level of kind of medium level of skill, non-professional level of skill, I just love rotary cutting. And anyone who can afford the space and the money to do rotary cutting, I really recommend it. So going on, as well as the cutting mats, what you also need, I would say even if you're using cardboard cutouts, is weights. Now these are my weights, however, they're virtually impossible to buy anymore. I don't know why. Every time I show these weights, everyone is like, where did you get those? Where did you get those? And the answer is I got them 10 years ago. They're Alpha branded weights. I have no idea why they don't sell them or why they're difficult to get. But having said that, about 8 times out of 10, I actually use the entire box. And so in my free sewing gadgets video, I talked about using a heavy book. And essentially that's what I'm doing here. I've got a rectangular box. It is quite helpful that it's rectangular or that it's got a nice flat bottom. And it's got something heavy in it, which could be weights, but could also be tins of beans. And it means you can put it down in your pattern piece and it's not going to move. Often I will leave some of the weights in the box and I will get others out for the thinner. So this is the smaller weight. That's what the smaller weight looks like. It's larger than a 50p coin. It's about 5 centimetres across. And they have little spiky feet on them. They are really good, but they're just impossible to buy. So I'm not recommending these specific Alpha weights. I am saying that sometimes I will get the smaller ones out and I'll put those on the edge of a pattern or on the smaller pieces, and then I will put my larger box filled with weights, but it could be filled with anything that's heavy, in the centre of the pattern piece, which keeps the whole thing from moving around. So having my weights and my whole rotary cutter set up, really, I love it, and I would really be very disappointed and sad to have to somehow go back to cutting with scissors again. I could, and I wouldn't stop sewing, but this is my preferred method. I love it. And I guess probably a third thing that goes along with that is something else that I've picked out. So this is my 6th of 8 things that I wouldn't like to sew without, and it is my clear quilting rulers. Now, I've never done quilting in my life, so I don't have them for quilting. I have them because they're so useful. What are they useful for? Well, first of all, they're useful because they're clear and you can see through them. They have all those markings on them, which means that when you're measuring something, you can see through, and for example, you can see that the edge of the fabric is there, and the grain line. They're great for checking the grain line on patterns. So if you put your pattern piece on the fabric, so let's say that this is the fabric. So I have 2 sizes personally. I have this one, which is about 2 feet long, very big, and I have this one, which is a foot long, approximately. They're American, so they're in inches. I sometimes measure with them, but I more often use them as grid lines and also for holding things flat. So in addition to my weights, that's why they go along, is I often put these long pieces of perspex essentially on, for example, a trouser pattern piece. This is really good. It's so tall, it doesn't even get all the way on the camera. So I often put that down on a trouser leg, and unless they're very skinny leggings or something, that will really hold the whole piece down. So you could definitely improvise with something other than that, because in that context you don't necessarily need the grid. The see-through thing is really helpful. So what do I do to find the grain line? If this was your piece of fabric with your pattern piece on, I would then lay this down, and so I would put one edge of my quilting ruler against the edge of the fabric, and then I would look on the grid and make sure I overlap the pattern piece and have the grain line showing, which hopefully is going this way, because if that's the edge of the fabric, the grain of the fabric is that way, and then I can see whether the grain line of the fabric is, the pattern piece is on grain or whether it's not. Is that a good enough description? So yeah, I use it to make sure that I put my pattern pieces straight on the fabric, is the short answer. And I also use it to control the fabric when I'm cutting it out. So I really love the quilting rulers. And even though they're quite big, they come with a little hole in them at the top. You can see that. And I have a nail in the side of one of my storage cupboards, and they just hang on there. So they take no space at all to store. And I really love them. So if you've got a birthday coming up, I got these for my birthday probably 10 years ago. I think I got the quilting rulers and all my rotary set up on one glorious birthday about 10 years ago. Yeah, and I use them all the time. So quite an investment, but you'll use them for a long time. Now my second to last, my 7th thing I would not want to be without when I sew is my trusty Sharpie markers. These let me fly by the seat of my pants and live dangerously, but they also make notch marking so much more convenient. So I've just happened to pick up the 2 that were in my sewing room. So I've got a kind of peachy colour and an orange colour there. And as I talked about in my free gadgets sewing video, I use these to mark notches, not to mark dots, although actually some people said they do use them to mark dots. They're definitely braver than me. If you're using it to mark the dot, for example, of a bust dart, please don't do that. Please don't do that, because these won't come out and you'll have a dot at the point of your bust and it will look weird and you'll ruin your garment. Please don't do that. But marking notches, such a quick method, reliable, touch wood, it's never gone wrong for me. So hopefully it won't go wrong for you. But ever since I thought, you know what, I could just mark it with a pen, it's really cut down and sped up my sewing process. So I love Sharpie markers, and I would hate to not be able to sew without them. That was a double negative. I would hate to have to sew without them. Yeah. The last one is really old-fashioned, and I made it myself. And I don't know why I hadn't had one of these before about 4 years ago, but I hadn't. And it is a wrist pincushion. Actually, I could probably do an 8A, which is the long pins. Yeah, I'm going to do an 8 and an 8A because I love my wrist pincushion. Not this particular one. Any pincushion, a wrist one. I much prefer elastic because trying to get the Velcro fastened on your own wrist is really faffy. I made this, it's just a rectangle. There are thousands of make your own pincushion videos and tutorials on the internet. But just having the pins there, it's just like, it's so easy. They're just there, they're not in a box and you haven't lost them. And how did it take me like 6 years of my life before I made one of these? How did that happen? I don't know, because I couldn't sew without one now. I really would be lost in my sewing room if I didn't have my pincushion. I just love it. It's so convenient. Also, it enchants small children. I've said this before about my pincushion, but when you wear it, children just love it. You have to be careful that you don't impale them on the pins, and I also keep needles in mine. Let me show you a bit closer. So I've got the long glass-headed pins, which is my 8A, because I do love these pins. Ever since I started using the longer glass-headed pins, you don't lose them. You can't iron, well, you can iron them, but they're not going to melt. I keep there my needle threader if I need one. That is just basically pinned on with a pin through there and a pin through the wired bit there. And I keep an assortment of hand sewing needles here so that whenever I need something, I use the bigger ones for threading in the tails of my overlocker threads, and I use the little ones for hand sewing or basting, and the rest is full of pins. And yeah, and if you were going to force me, not very nice, if you were going to force me and say, right, you can only have one of those, you're going to have to go back to all your old methods and keep one, I'd keep this. I would, because it just makes life so much easier. All of the things that I've chosen, I see now actually that I've chosen the stuff that makes my sewing life easier. These are the things that speed up my process, that work for me, that I love to use, and I would love to hear what yours are. I always say that, and it truly is my most favourite thing, is hearing everybody's wisdom. So for example, in my What Did I Sew in June video, I had lots of questions about what should I do with this dress, and already I've had so many responses. Lots of different contradictory responses, but that's totally fine because it's really interesting to hear the different points of view, and lots of things that have made me go, oh, I had not thought of that. So you guys, you've got all the wisdom, and I love that you share it with me. Thank you. And you share it with everyone. So if you ever want to know stuff, read the comments of YouTube videos, especially mine. But I can only really vouch for mine because they're the ones I know the best. But read the comments because there's always good stuff in there. Now, I said I would recap the competition. So if you're watching this video in the future, after Sunday the 16th of August, then it's over. So you might as well just turn off now. Or thank you very much for watching, and goodbye. Please watch something else on my channel. If you're watching before the 16th of August, here is the competition and here is what you need to do. So the competition is kind of sponsored by Tailor Nova, but as I said at the start, this video isn't. I'm just recapping things for you. So if you haven't seen my original video, I will link it here and at the end of the video and in the description box so you can't miss it. Go and have a look, and it explains everything that's going on my channel. If you have, or if you've forgotten, then here's the reminder. So we're having a competition that's all about showing us what you have made using the Tailor Nova software. Between now and the end of July, we have got a 10% discount code, which will be here. It is JoeySewy10. There will also be links in the description box that are affiliate links to go to Tailor Nova, so you can buy the software. Well, actually, you don't buy the software, you buy download credits. So you can play with the software to your heart's content, and that is loads of fun. Even if you never intend to print anything out, that's lots of fun. And you can do all of that and not pay a penny. If you ever want to print out one of the patterns that you've made, either as a shop equivalent size, so a standard dress size, or as your own custom size, you have an option to do either, then you'll need to buy either download credits or a subscription. It's up to you. Basically, a subscription gives you a little bit more flexibility and it gives you access to a wider potential use for the patterns. The download credits, if you're just going to sew a garment for yourself, is probably all you need, and there are scales of credits. The more credits you buy, the cheaper they work out per each. Go and have a look at the website for all the pricing details, but you can get 10% off any option until the end of July. The competition, whether you have, however you have accessed the software, is when you've made something, whether it's the first time you've used Tailor Nova or whether it's the 50th time you've used Tailor Nova, whether you made this thing a while ago or whether you make it between now and the 16th of August, just share your make. There are 3 ways to share on screen now. You have got tagging me on Instagram, you have got making a YouTube video, which would be amazing, and letting me know about it in the comments of this video, or you can email me about the video, or you can simply email me the pictures. I would love to be able to share with everybody any pictures that you share. That's not compulsory, and I will ask your permission on a person by person basis, so I won't share anything without permission, but I would love to be able to share them and show all the amazing diversity of things that people are making and the flexibility of what Tailor Nova can do. The competition prizes are there's 2 bundles that are almost identical. There's a clover yo-yo maker in each bundle. One is a circular one is heart-shaped. There is a free motion for beginners embroidery set, and there is a £20 voucher for any worldwide online fabric shop of your choice. So if you have your favourites, like I do, like a lot of you do, that's the shop you can go to. You are not bound to one particular shop, so you will get a £20 voucher or your currency equivalent, and you can go and shop to your heart's content. So that is what you can win just by sharing. It's basically a lucky dip. It's not going to be me saying, well, that one was best, because how do I know? It's just about gathering everybody's together, and then out of everybody who's good enough to enter, I will choose 2 winners, and that's what you'll win. So that's your roundup of the competition. I hope you're excited to take part. I'm quite nervous about hoping that we get lots of entries. And I hope you enjoyed this video. Let me know your absolute would rather die than lose them sewing tools, or maybe not that dramatic, in the comments down below. And I will see you again later in the week. And my next video will be a Tailor Nova one, and it's all about designing a wedding dress. Bye for now.